This week's Farm Basics is brought to you by satshot.com. Satellites aren't just for NASA anymore. Use the power of satellite imagery to create variable rate management zones in your fields. To reduce input costs and increase yields on your farm, go to satshot.com.
In today's Farm Basics, we thought we'd have a little vocabulary quiz. Well, maybe not quite so much, but we thought we would explain some of the terms that are used when we're looking at fertilizer samples to make them a little easier for everyone.
Well, if you're a non-farmer, you probably don't need to know a lot of stuff about soil testing, but we thought we'd talk about a few of these very common terms that farmers talk about every day and just kind of relate them to you, the non-farmer.
I think that whether you're a non-farmer or a farmer, you do need to know these terms, because if you have a yard, you need to know these terms. You need to understand how to fertilize that yard, because you don't just buy a bag of fertilizer, go out and throw it out on the yard. How much do you need? How much does that ground call for? Are you just wasting it? Are you doing something that's smart for the environment or not? So here's how you understand if you're making the right choices, whether it's on a great big farm or a small lawn.
Okay, let's start with ppm. Parts per million, and what that really means. To begin with, if you look at soil, here's my first trivia question for you. If you have soil that's 6 inches deep, because usually we pull a 6-inch soil core, if you have soil 6 inches deep over an entire acre, approximately how many pounds is that? How many pounds does that weigh? Well, roughly that weighs about 2 million pounds. So the way you convert parts per million to pounds per acre, if you've pulled a 6-inch soil core and you get a reading that says 20 parts per million, you simply multiply times 2 because you have 2 million pounds that you are representing. So 20 times 2 equals 40. You'd have 40 pounds per acre in a 20 part per million sample.
All right. Well, how about another set of letters here, Brian? How about CEC?
Yep. CEC stands for cation exchange capacity. And basically, let's put it to you this way. If your reading is 10 or less, you have lighter soil, or in other words, sandier soil. If you have a reading that's in the range of 10 to probably 25, you have what we would call medium textured soils. And if you have a reading over 25, you probably have real heavy soils. Cation exchange capacity is a measure not just of your soil type, but also a measure of organic matter and the type of clay you have and the amount of clay you have in your soil. So again, it's amount of organic matter, amount of clay, and type of clay you have in your soil.
Okay, well, understanding parts per million and cation exchange capacity are important because you're going to be putting nutrients out there. You need to know how many nutrients are already in your soils and available for your crop or your lawn or garden or whatever. But you also need to understand if you're going to be putting some more plant fertility out there, can your soils hold that? So let's talk about the different nutrients that you could be putting out. How about the primary nutrients? What's primary about these nutrients?
Well, the primary nutrients are the ones that crops require the most of. N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen moves quite a bit in the soil. Phosphorus and potassium hardly move at all in the soil. In other words, if you put phosphorus and potassium 3 inches down in your soil, I don't care how much rain you get, if you have medium to heavy textured soils, that phosphorus and potassium is probably almost never moving. Whereas nitrogen, with a big rain, that could move down even in relatively heavy soils. So we look a lot at nitrogen and cation exchange capacity, and we have a real simple formula here for your cation exchange capacity in relation to how much nitrogen your soil can hold.
What we do is take 10 times our cation exchange capacity, and that's how many pounds of nitrogen you could apply at one time. So if your cation exchange capacity is 15, you could theoretically put 15 times 10 or 150 pounds of nitrogen on your soil at one time, and the soil is capable of holding it and not allowing it to leach to any great degree.
Okay, a couple last things. Secondary nutrients and micronutrients. The secondary nutrients are nutrients that are really needed by plants, just not in quite as great a degree as N, P, and K, the primary nutrients. So the secondary nutrients are sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. How about the micronutrients?
Well, there are a number of different micronutrients, and they are still very important for crops. You absolutely have to have them for the crops to grow, but you just don't need very much of them. And in many cases, you need much less than 1 pound to raise a complete crop for that acre. So the micronutrients are just used in very small quantities.
And micronutrients are things like zinc, copper, boron, manganese, and a few others.
Well, we hope our discussion today has enlightened you on some of the terminology used when we're talking about fertilizer, but all of these terms aren't going to help you control our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?